Okay, I think we're live. Good evening. Hope you've had a good week, given it's Friday. Some of us still follow the normie calendar of Friday being a culturally significant day because it's the end of the work week, quote unquote, and the weekend when we hang out with our normie friends, all that type of stuff. So hope the week has been generous to you. If it hasn't, you know, the next one's coming up soon. So no hard feelings. Sound good? AV good? Okay, wonderful. Great. We always try to keep the Friday streams somewhat lean so people can just enjoy their weekends. So let's try to do something similar today. First things first, of course, go download the FTX app. Great for portfolio tracking, moving in and out of assets. It's our belief that it's the best crypto mobile app on the market. They're good to us, so go support us by supporting them. Yeah, that's that. So let's just take a look at stuff. As per the title, I think there are two key levels that you can delineate in a thick red pen to help you determine crypto market trend. One on Bitcoin, one on ETH. So I'll just, I'll literally answer the title question first, and then we can do the multi-time frame breakdown, all that fancy stuff. So for BTC, this will come as no surprise, but it's important not to lose perspective of things. The main narrative from a technical sense that we're dealing with is not only the all-time high break, but more specifically the breakout of a multi-month range, right? This is the top of the market, the big distribution sideways, etc., etc., and the market is currently above it. In doing so, it's also a clear higher high and a shift in kind of market structure, right? Obviously went down here, then finally had a low. There he is. Thanks for showing up.
Sorry, bro.
No, it's all good. It's all good. Yeah, so I was just talking about weekly market structure. So I put the title as two key levels to determine crypto trend. And it's kind of what we wrote in Technical Roundup, which is free, trletter.com. Go read it. Trades better than we do, still. But the basic premise is that the main technical driver at the moment is, yes, all-time high, but also the range high reclaim / breakout. Market structure shifted into it. You've got low, high, higher low, higher high. And ideally, when you get a reclaim of such a big level, you just want continuation. And so everything looks good for Bitcoin as long as it's above this 58k area. Now, as we've argued previously, it's allowed to dip lower to make that higher low leg somewhere before continuing higher. But just the fact of losing the all-time high breakout and the range high breakout, it's a bit of a unpleasant sign. It's a sign of weakness, right? And I think in that case, I don't know if you agree, Doug, you can let me know. If you're really conservative, and people hate these boomer takes, but still, if you're conservative, if it loses the range high, yes, I think in terms of proximity to invalidation, there's a really good trade to be taken in the higher low area around 50k. But personally, there's nothing wrong with saying, you know what, now that that's been lost, I'm going to wait until it's reclaimed again to get back into the market, and at that point, expect a push higher. So from a trading point of view, I think it's totally fine to say, yeah, weekly market structure's bullish, losing the range high sucks, but it's a do or die type of thing around 50. I think that's a really cool trade and one I'll look to take myself most likely if it sets up. But if you lose this range high, I wouldn't hold anyone, wouldn't think worse of anyone for saying, well, you know what, this kind of failed breakout stuff I'm not a fan of. If it gets back above, that's a much easier long than trying to fish for some sort of higher low. What do you think?
Yeah, 100% agreed. I mean, it starts looking really, really weird when you have like all these tries at all-time high and they don't do anything, and then you actually start losing supports, right? I mean, generally speaking, when you get like these SFP scenarios, and I've seen a shitload of them already, where people like talk about the SFP of the SFP of the SFP, right?
Yes.
Like usually that's a good sign. Like you want to see those. Like if they happen over and over and over again, usually it's a sign that like the market wants to head higher, and people are just like over leveraged and they're getting shaken out. We've had the same thing before, like the 6K breakdown, where we've had like a bunch of SFP to the downsides, and people were like, okay, this is going to go higher this time and this time and this time. Like the more often it happens, the less likely that resistance or support is going to hold, right? So it's like, it's not the worst sign that we're doing this. But if you do this, like this SFP stuff, into like losing support, then it starts getting scary, in my opinion. And then, I mean, might as well just sit one out and wait till it reclaims that structure, because if it doesn't, I think we're in trouble. But right now, I'm still like relatively positive. I don't really see a good reason to panic just yet. Like I said, like these SFPs don't make me too bearish.
Yeah, good. As for, you know, for those who are somehow living under a rock over the last couple of years and not aware of what an SFP is, the acronym for a swing failure pattern, it's when you have a swing in the market. This is a swing high example, right? You delineate the top of it, usually the wick, for where that high is. And SFP is when the market swings or trades past the swing point, but fails to stay above it and closes back below. At that point, suggesting that you've had a failed breakout above that high. And then the traditional pattern is when it closes, trades above and closes below a swing point. That's your signal to sell, de-risk, or do whatever. And the bullish example is obviously the opposite of that, where if you have a swing low and the market comes down, trades through it, but closes above, that suggests, you know, a failed breakdown, which is bullish, while this is a failed breakout, which is supposedly bearish. Now, the thing is, most reversal patterns are kind of time sensitive, whereby if you're going to call something a stop run or a hunt or a failed yada yada, it all relies on the premise of trapped traders being forced to make a decision, right? So if you've got a market which keeps giving the same spike but not reversing, then the probability that that interpretation is correct becomes lower. Because really good trap setups, they spike and the market vanishes, right? If you keep getting spikes which don't unwind or lead to the actual reversal, then it's normally just a sign of either demand holding up as you wick lower. Sorry, the other way around, right? If you keep like poking up without dooming, it's just pretty bullish and the market's grinding higher. And if you keep poking down without going up, you know, that's kind of shitty. It's just someone selling until they're going to get their way, just in the same way as someone's buying until they're going to get their way. So yes, the wicks and the closes and all that type of stuff, it's contextually important, but those patterns are generally kind of time sensitive, and if you're getting the spikes and no moves, then they lose their weight a little bit, in my opinion, at least.
Yep. Well said.
Cool.
That's what I wanted to say. Something that I would have said if I was as articulate.
Nah, dude, I started like only 50 times. But yeah, long story short, this kind of breakout price action is annoying because it's like, you know, none of the breakouts are really sticking on lower time frames. Higher time frames, as long as you're above 58, hard to be bearish. Just like you don't want to be bullish when the market's close to but below resistance, it's hard to be bearish when the market's close to but above support. You know, it's just like, what's your target, right? You still probably would have to close something back at the level itself, and the risk reward changes, yada yada. So structurally, just to summarize view on BTC, fine as long as it's above 58. If it dips below 58, as we've discussed, there's a higher low candidate somewhere in the 50s, but you'd be forgiven for saying, fuck that, I will only buy it if it reclaims that range high, whenever that may be. That's more or less it for BTC. So level for trend, more or less 58k, to be honest. While 50k wouldn't be trend shifting, there are just much better longs available at that point from a probability point of view. But from a proximity to invalidation point of view, you bet I'm going to be punting here if the market gets there. All of this is counting chickens before they hatch type of thing, because support is still intact. Maybe we're all just super impatient with this type of price action. You never know.
I think so.
Do you think it's that?
Yeah, I mean, people are like, this has to move, this has to move, this has to move, and then they leverage, and then they get fucked, and then they do it again because they're like, okay, I just missed it this time, but the next time it's gonna move, and then they do it again and again and again. Yeah, I think it's basically like just people being way too impatient. And I'll change my mind on that the moment we start losing support, right? But right now it's basically just like people can't just sit there waiting for something for 2 or 3 or 4 weeks in crypto. It's just not how it works. Like people always expect the gains to be immediate or the losses to be immediate. And sometimes that just doesn't happen. And I feel like we're at that stage where it's like this could easily grind for like a little bit longer. And still be fine, right? I mean, just look at the zoomed out structure, right? Look at the weekly time frame. I mean, that's just insanely like that move up is insane. And if it like consolidates for a little longer, while I don't like, I mean, I'm not gonna celebrate that because one, it's boring, and two, it kind of makes like a spike to the upside into like a down move more likely to me. Like I want to have this parabolic before I want to have it go sideways, because yeah, at the end of the day, like we're above all-time high. If you just go sideways and then break out and break down again, that looks like a top, right?
Yeah, yeah.
But until that happens, I mean, I'm just gonna chill.
That sounds right. And I've just put it in text form. BTC above 58k good. If 58 lost, annoying / FFS. In that case, rebuy, reclaim, or do or die 50k. Seems broadly helpful. I will say there's like a low time frame, intraday, whatever support, more or less where the market is now. It's just kind of this consolidation before the most recent breakout leg. You can just call it whatever, 60, 62k. Not a level that I'm personally punting, but like it's there, right? I think Technical Roundup's got something very similar based on this prior swing high, so kind of just above where the box is. So yeah, this still
And
structurally
ETH has the same too.
Yes, yes. So speaking of ETH, now that Bitcoin's done, it's a bit simpler. So the things we essentially agreed on in Technical Roundup is that now that this weekly breakout has taken shape and there are a few candles behind it, so to speak, and we're talking specifically about the weekly range high breakout here, it would look pretty bad if if that breakout were to fail and lose that structure, right? Well, again, from a market structure point of view, you can still make a case for a bounce at whatever 3k, mid 3k level here. There just isn't really that much space between what would be a failed breakout and then the nearest support. I think it'd be good for a bounce, but the market would look really rough if you have like a 4 or 5 week breakout and it just completely slams below the level itself. I think you can employ a similar methodology, which is essentially up as long as the breakout sticks. If the breakout doesn't stick, you can just say, well, you know, God knows, the probability of bullish continuation kind of drops a fair bit, and the chart would look really rough. So there'd be nothing wrong with punting either the reclaim of the range high or support. Now, the tricky part is, and you actually argued this in Technical Roundup better than I did, Don, is that this mid 3k, the chances that it holds if you get a failed range breakout this far after the breakout point, it's not that great, right? It's just a bit close to the actual range high to be a compelling higher low structure. Is that like a fair summary of what you think?
I mean, it's like when you break the most important level on the chart, a shitty or like somewhat shitty level below it probably isn't going to do much, especially when like the entire context of this thing is so strong, right? Like the context is basically we broke all-time high, we rallied out of it, and I mean the rally's just been like a consistent up move, basically. It hasn't like accelerated at all, and if you kind of break that, and then you get like a completely different narrative, right? What's the point of like breaking out and then immediately crossing back down again? I don't trust those breakouts. I hate breakouts in general that kind of return to their origin, and especially like go back below their origin. And I mean, you can punt it again if it goes back again, right? Like let's say it does break out after breaking, like let's say it breaks down from here, breaks all the supports, and then goes back and breaks the 4 point, what is it? The weekly resistance or support right now?
Yeah, it's like
4K.
Yeah, it's just 4K flat, yeah.
Yeah, and if it reclaims that again, like a second time, I'm down to be bullish again. But until then, I want to see just ETH just keep on moving up. If it starts losing 4K, I'm going to be bearish in ETH. And that might sound counterintuitive, being like, okay, if the price goes lower, I'm going to be bearish. But it's basically a bet on momentum, right? Because right now I'm betting on momentum keeping like that. I'm betting on that momentum keeps going. And if it doesn't, I think momentum is going to flip basically. And then you're going to have a bunch of people like me that are in position that just don't want to be in position anymore. And I'm going to try to be like one of the earlier sellers. And then I can still buy like liquidations if they go really hard, because at that point I think they would. So yeah, my plan's pretty much like, if 4K goes, I'm going to be bearish. If we reclaim it at some point again, I mean, I'll be happy to flip again, lose like 5% or something in the process. But that's fine by me. And hope this breakout sticks and keeps on going. And so far, like the ETH walk up on the lower time frames isn't actually too bad in my opinion. Like it doesn't look bad. It's just slow.
Yes. I mean, I just left a note, like a summary thing of both Bitcoin and ETH, so people who want to enjoy their weekends can wait no longer, which is Bitcoin above 58k good, below 58k less good, do or die, high or low at 50k, and or reclaim 58, setups-wise. ETH above 4k good, below 4k pretty bad, mid 3k support but less compelling, high or low. Is that broadly accurate?
Yeah.
Cool. Yeah, I think I'm thinking on similar terms. As for the low time frame walk up, I find that pretty interesting, because this looks like something out of Baby Pips, right? Like how
Yep.
ETH has moved from the bottom. It's just like when you're doing your market structure explainer to a friend or something. This is how you draw it, right? Or if you're teaching trend lines to someone, don't know why you do that to a friend, but you know that this is sort of the type of chart you would look at for that hindsight educational material. So it's like a strong trend. It's a trend that's functional. And even on like a whatever horizontal basis, the market came back and retested the last base before this pump up, similar to Bitcoin, and that's holding. So there's nothing scary on ETH at the moment, right? So the trend is intact, above the breakout level, and the recent trend retest level is also intact, the horizontal support. But you know what? I still don't fucking like it. I don't, because I still have PTSD when the market just does this float up, this like purely diagonal uptrend, without building any kind of horizontal support or consolidation along the way. It could go, it's likely to go whatever, much higher at some point, but when it starts to nuke, none of this is going to be support. It'll come straight back for 4K. In my opinion, at least.
Lower, I think.
Yes.
Like if it goes, I think it really goes.
Yes, exactly. So that's the only thing that makes me uncomfortable with this kind of lull, you know, the passive trend. Just like, oh, just another day of higher highs and higher lows in the most diagonal channel trend line I've ever seen in my life. It's like at some point there's a candle which breaks that, and that candle literally looks like this, you know? It'll take out like weeks of trend in 1 or 2 days. That's always how it happens in crypto. I know it might sound like market PTSD, and it very likely is, given that the context hasn't shifted yet. But at the very least, be aware that when those things start to break, be it the diagonal or the mini horizontal support that's holding on the way up, etc., the unwind that comes with these types of purely diagonal structures tends to be fucking massive in crypto terms. And, you know, all the trailing stops that are built up along the way with every single higher low, those just get completely smacked in one candle. So that's just something to be aware of. I wouldn't stick around if things start to get weak, because there's too much trend-following juice in this thing, which will get squeezed out if the second it doesn't... The second it stops doing what it's doing at the moment, you know?
Yep. And I mean, it can, these kind of situations, they play out like either you get a massive pump to
it
kind
just
of
accelerates.
Yeah. Either it accelerates or it just giga dumps. So it's the longer this goes, the more nervous people are.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. I'm already nervous. How long? I can't wait any longer.
Yep. And I mean, it is scary to watch this. And I think if there's any way that you can kind of lose it all, if this goes down 20-30% in a single day, I think you should not be in that position. Because there's a very, very good chance that it goes. I think there's a very, very good chance that it goes up or down 20% in a single day in the next week or two. And if you can't deal with that, as in if you're positioned in a way that would kind of ruin you, then you should rethink your kind of trading strategies, because whenever you see these kind of patterns, they only play out that way. Like, this isn't going to continue for like forever, this walk up. It's going to be relatively soon that it accelerates or just completely nukes the shit out of all of us.
Yes.
So
thing is, you'll have to like pay for this sooner rather than later in any case, right? Because we know if it takes a shit, none of this is going to be support until 4K or below, right? So however far we go from 4K, none of this purely horizontal stuff is really going to be a good rebuy level if you get like a momentum driven dump. But even if it breaks up, the same applies, just arguably with a steeper haircut, right? Because like, let's say it finally, it does the same thing for a couple more days and then it accelerates, you still haven't built up any structure that I'd be willing to buy if it were to dip. So your support, unless you build up some super cycle consolidation and then breakout, which is totally possible, but in the absence of something like that, even if it accelerates up and breaks this trend that way by just going vertical, that just creates more distance between where the market is and where it's likely to retest at some point sooner rather than later. The last time I felt like that, I remember like it was yesterday. It was here. So when ETH was literally topped, I had this cluster at, 3,300? Yeah, I remember it like it was yesterday. Like, it was this cluster at 3,300, and I was like talking to my friends, and I was like, dude, if this cluster goes, I'm not sure where there is support. Like, I don't really like this overhead level. It would just be the ugliest thing, and there's nothing below us, In that case, it wasn't really a diagonal uptrend. It was just like a number go up with no sideways. Like, equally bad in terms of giving you like volume clusters or just structures in general. But that's sort of how I felt around 3,300 near the top, where it's like I'm looking below me and there's nothing I want to buy until there's like a 50% haircut from current price. And I feel I'll be faced with a similar dilemma at some point in the next week or two, where I'm looking at the chart and I'm like, yeah, I can short-term trade this and do whatever, but if it nukes, the nearest support is 30-40% away and everything else is fluff. So that's just something to bear in mind.
I mean, the thing that the back then, like what you highlighted just now, that's like very fractal to what we're doing right now. Like, if you zoom out a little bit more, and that was actually the acceleration of the trend. So you can draw like a trend line that is very similar to the one that we have right now.
Oh god, I see where you're going with this. Yeah,
below like all of those. And then you have like the acceleration, and I think it's gonna play out like if we have a bullish acceleration, I think it's gonna play out the exact same way again. Like if it's bullish, I think it's gonna nuke really hard after accelerating, and if it's bearish, we're just gonna get the nuke. So it's like,
is it something like this? I've just done the doodle. It'll take a second to.
Yes, exactly like that.
Great. I should have done the acceleration up to like 10k or something, so at least it's worth the nuke. Mine goes up to like 6k. I didn't think about it, but yeah.
No, but I think that's pretty much like if it's gonna play out like to the upside, I think that's how it's gonna play out. So if it breaks out, I'm gonna be selling. And I mean I might actually like get out the leverage account again and try to hedge some stuff, because I mean I hate these, like I love these kind of things and I hate them at the same time, because like you cannot hold into something like this when it starts breaking out. Usually, like, I mean, sometimes it works, but usually it's just too scary. So I'm going to be selling into that breakout, wherever it goes. Like maybe it goes to 5, maybe it goes to 6, maybe it goes to 7. If it just fails from here, I'd be sad, because I would still be sitting in the position. But like I said, I have like an exit plan below 4K.
It's the perfect Don plan. If it goes up, I'm selling. If it goes down, I'm selling. Like...
Yep. But I mean, it went up a shitload since I bought. So it's like, if it goes up, it's going to be up more than 2x from where I bought. So I'm not going to complain about that. And if it goes down, I'm still going to sell somewhat in profit. I mean, it's going to be less, but it's
the haircut candle. Yeah. Okay.
That's the plan.
That's pretty good. I think for the majors, more or less clear. Breakouts should stick above 58k for Bitcoin. Below that, things get dicey. You either bet on the high or low or buy the reclaim. ETH also above 4k is good, but some specific trend idiosyncrasies to keep track of. specifically this perfect channel, trend line, staircase stuff doesn't last forever. If it accelerates, they'll probably accelerate into some sort of local top. If it starts to dump, the only reasonable level is 4K, but even then, that retest looks ugly. So just be aware of your bearings on both of those. I think in general, the one sentence structure is if these weekly breakouts fail, reducing risk appetite or waiting for a reclaim becomes much more reasonable than it is now.
Yeah,
that's sort of
the only way that I would feel much more comfortable with this would be if it liquidates a shitload of people into 4K, and then immediately wicks back up.
Yes.
Then I'd be like, okay, I could actually see this go further. But with like current market structure, if we don't get that, and I mean, I'm not necessarily expecting it, and I could see us nuke straight through 4K if we even attempt that. So yeah, for me, it's like I'm just gonna be sitting here hoping for the best.
Fair enough.
And I mean, it's the weekend, right? Weekend price action usually gets engulfed on the Monday that follows it. So it's like, it doesn't really matter where this goes right now.
Yes.
Not too much anyway. So I'm going to just chill on the weekend.
Sounds smart. Those are our views on the majors, more or less. I want to look at kind of the futures market and some open interest funding stuff. Now, we obviously dipped a little bit, and you have the usual things when you have a small move, and the guys who are really bullish are like, oh, leverage reset, leverage gone, let's fucking go, you know? This 54 billion. Now that we're down, it's at 48 billion. That's a very minor haircut, and that's across the entire market, all things considered. If you want to see what a flush looks like, how about the August-September dump, where on the 6th of September, open interest was at 44 billion, and then on the 7th of September, it was 31 billion. You know what I mean? Like, in terms of magnitude or percentage change, that's what a real flush looks like, you know? Sort of deep into double-digit percentages, and like the chart looks like this. This is nothing. It's not noticeable, at least in the global market open interest. There is some better evidence, though. I will say for the liquidations, and again, this is all from our friends at Coinalyze, so go check out their website. Data's free and all that. So if we look at all coins liquidations, I mean, compared to historical standards or levels, we're not even close, right? Like in the past couple days, this is a blip compared to the big leverage flush resets, whatever. It's a nothing burger. I mean, obviously the April-May one is going to be the outlier and the hilarious exception, but even compared to more contained legs, I wouldn't say there's anything too special about any of this for the time being. The good news is that futures look far better than they did just a couple of days ago. So I'm just going to refresh this just in case. So if we look at quarterly basis annualized, that dipped all the way back down to around 12% on average. At its peak, it was knocking on 20. So in percentage terms, that's a pretty big deleveraging in the quarterlies, which is good. The short-term funding picture is kind of whatever. You can make an argument for price down, funding up, which is usually rough, and that's sort of what we've had. But this is very variable and changes a lot. I'm paying more attention to the compression in the quarterly basis, more so than kind of short-term funding stuff for the time being. But as far as funding goes, what I've actually found interesting is that finally, and no one's, people often talk about funding rates on Twitter when it's high, but altcoin funding got completely crushed on this move. Maybe not completely, but like compared to where it was, this is like a pretty reasonable insofar as asking for some sort of reset. So if this thing lets me navigate it, I'd be really grateful. Altcoins on with that screenshot, they were all about like 250, 300% APR on average across all altcoins. It was insane. I'm using Bybit here as my proxy / indicator, and if you look at the APRs now, which is this column here, this column here, it's like a third of where it was, and much lower in some cases. So if you're going to make the case for like some sort of deleveraging or a flush, even if the open interest doesn't show it, futures basis looks healthier, and altcoin funding looks much more reasonable than it was just a couple of days ago. So that's the good news on that front. You been following any of this?
Yeah, I mean, it's much better. I agree.
Yeah.
I mean, it's kind of like it's still like the OI is still kind of worrying.
Yes.
But I mean, that's like the bigger the market gets, the higher the OI is gonna be. I mean, it just makes sense, right?
Yes.
But it is kind of like
The fact that
it
it
is
doesn't budge
terrifying.
when the market eats shit is kind of scary.
Yeah.
I will bring up this chart, which gives you kind of insights into the anatomy, or like who was behind this most recent breakout. I think it's pretty interesting. Again, it's on Coinalyze. I'm going to add open interest, coin margined, stable coin margined, and then the aggregated funding rate as well. And I'm going to use the daily chart. Okay.
Yeah, let me quickly intercut. Like someone's like so up or down in the chat, and that's like something that I get really fucking angry about. It's like, I mean, I've talked about my positioning, right? That I'm like still holding. So it's like it's such a stupid comment to make because it's like, of course, there's always the chance that it goes up and it goes down, right? And the only thing that I can share or we can share is like the positioning and kind of like, okay, where do we think it goes? But if you have anyone that you follow that says this is 100% going to go up or down, he's just a fucking idiot. And you shouldn't listen to him.
But you're forgetting we're on YouTube, right? Where the whole thing is just to make really high conviction price predictions based on nothing to tell people what they want to hear, and because you don't actually have to trade, right? You're just an entertainer at that point.
Yeah, I mean, if you make all your money by like getting money from like projects that you can shill,
yes,
then that might be like a good strategy. If you're a trader, it's probably a shit strategy. I've seen so many people that have like high, like beyond high conviction and are like, okay, this is 100% going to happen. And I mean, especially on the bullish side of things, like we both know people that have been incredibly bullish from like below 10K, expecting 100K on Bitcoin, that are now broke because they went too hard on the leverage or went too like risk on being like too 100% certain that this is the dip and there cannot be another one. Shit can always go up or down. It's just a game of probabilities. But yeah, I just thought I'd say that because it grinds my gears every time.
Yeah, sure. No, I understand. So, very quickly on the futures side of things, it's been interesting to observe that stablecoin margined contracts, they basically peaked near the bottom and didn't really make a higher high since that point. Much of the rally has been driven by coin margined contracts, which is historically the degen contract to get long, because again the convexity works against you in that contract. It's a great contract to hedge or short, and not a great one to be long, because the non-linearity of your margin and your P&L works against you on the long side when it comes to inverse futures. Those of you who remember the BitMEX glory days from 2018, 2019, you're basically longing your longs with your long collateral to long. You just keep like adding layers to this. But it's like longing Bitcoin with Bitcoin collateral and getting paid in, margined in and paid in Bitcoin for all of it. So God forbid Bitcoin went down a little bit, the whole, your entire positioning gets fucked, is the simplest way of explaining it. Your collateral value goes down as the position becomes a losing one. So, you know, you're less collateralized as you're losing money. It's just a very ugly cycle. Now, stablecoin margined contracts haven't made a higher high, and it's kind of just been flat since this drop here. Interestingly, on the coin margin was doing a lot of the heavy lifting, and specifically on this breakout that we had that's now finding some difficulty. If we zoom in a little bit, you can kind of see that from the previous high. Actually, let me use the actual high. So from the previous high, stable coin margin didn't make a higher high. It just traded back to where it was in terms of open interest. But it was really the coin margined market which led the breakout, if you will. And again, those positions tend to be less collateralized and just a bit more degen-y and tricky. So it's not a massive surprise that they're feeling some pain on the breakout not sticking. In terms of just funding stuff, again, yeah, it's up It's green if you want to use indicator stuff, but it's not too scary at the moment, given the quarterly basis we looked at. And I can bring up funding rates in general. There's nothing too scary at the moment. Obviously, when you have a big move down, or even just like a noticeable move down, funding will normally fall in line to some extent, unless you get the really ugly scenario where price keeps going down and funding keeps going up. That wasn't generally the case on this occasion, especially because the move down was pretty quick. But because futures have leverage, when the market gets pounded, the futures traders get liquidated, and those liquidations of longs push the perp price lower than it would usually go in the spot books, right? So as a result of that displacement, the liquidations pushing the perp further, be it up or down, in this case down, that tends to bring funding in line a little bit if it was high before the dump. So nothing too special on the funding side at the moment. Decent looking reset, if you will, on altcoins, at least at a much more sustainable level now than they were before, which again isn't surprising given the market itself got pounded, and seeing quarterly basis come in close to 12% down from 20 is also pretty good. So contextually, nothing too scary apart from open interest not budging. I still think we'll see that eat shit at some point to a non-trivial degree, and that'll be a wonderful trade which I look forward to taking. But for the time being, futures look okay, market's still above support, nothing too scary, but just be ready to flip that switch if the breakout fails, because at that point there are much clearer opportunities and better longs rather than holding the failed breakout long, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, just basically if it breaks down, right, it's gonna break down hard.
If it breaks down, have a breakdown.
I like that.
Yeah.
No, I mean, if it breaks down, it's gonna break down hard, so you can get on the job of buying liquidations.
Yes.
And those
always a fun trade.
Tend to be the best trades that you can get in crypto. And that's basically what I'm thinking as well. But I'm still hoping for. I'm cautiously optimistic.
That's a good way to put it. So we've done Bitcoin technicals. Above 58, good. Below that, 50/reclaim 58. ETH above 4K, good. Below that, just kind of yikes. Generally, 4K reclaim is the better long. Futures look better than they did. Nothing too scary at the moment. Funding rates always change very quickly. Quarterly basis fine. Altcoins fine. But again, this stuff is pretty variable. Only red flag in futures is that we had that dump. I mean, how big was it? It wasn't even that big, right? From high to low.
So far, it's nothing.
There's nothing there. It's like let me measure that. Yeah, it's like a 10% move. It's pretty reasonable as far as these things go. But still, seeing open interest not budge at all on even on a 10% move, that's the only kind of red flag out of all the futures data we look at. Is that there's a lot of I don't know how to define it, almost like reluctant leverage. That isn't going to stick around forever. So something to be aware of. The final kind of markety thing before we go on to some very quick news, memes, and wrap it up. Speaking of the passive staircase from Coinbase Institutional, Bitcoin realized vol slowly drifting back towards a 1-year low. That's pretty scary. In an ideal world, vol bottoms and then price accelerates up and you get like trend continuation as a product of volatility coming back to the market. That would be really cool. The ugly scenario of that is vol comes back, but to the downside, where you essentially have the market break out, all-time high, technically good, etc., but there are just no marginal buyers or insufficient marginal buyers to keep lifting offers and taking this thing higher. And then the vol just picks up on some sort of de-risking, deleveraging, macro, Evergrande, credit, treasury, S&P, tax bullshit. I don't know what, right? Something like that. That would be the less pleasant scenario. But just something to bear in mind that these, the passive staircase in ETH and Bitcoin just kind of more or less chopping around from all-time high. That's probably not gonna last forever. Yeah. Any comments?
No, I mean, I think like in general, it's a pretty good problem to have.
Yes.
Pretty much like volatility at the lows when Bitcoin's at 60K. I didn't think we'd have that in like the next 5 years.
Yeah, true.
I'm actually very, very surprised. But yeah, I mean, we'll see how it plays out. In general, I think it's probably gonna come back with like a breakout that fails or breakdown that fails.
Yeah.
And then we run in either direction. We'll see which one it goes for.
Oh, you're doing the up and down thing again. Careful.
Yeah. But I want to answer a question from chat.
Go for it.
Rekt Gautama, or I don't know how to pronounce
Sounds
that
right.
second name, but us talking about coin margin longs and saying it's a bad thing, even though like BitMEX used to like be the only platform that you traded on, and during like the old days, and that was all coin margined. And yeah, I mean, the reason, in my opinion, one of the main reasons why we didn't like get out of the eternal 6K range ish, as in like go sideways every time it pumps, people get liquidated, is because everyone was on coin margin, right? Like people were trying to make back their bull market wins by leveraging. And every time price moved up, there was just like a liquidation cascade to the downside, because like people like leveraged to the gills and then just completely got ran over. And once we've had the March 2020 crash, BitMEX kind of died basically. Like the volume just disappeared from there because pretty much everyone on BitMEX got liquidated. And ever since then, almost all bigger players in the industry have moved off of coin margin longs and just kind of moved into like different even different avenues to trade in, right? Like people move to Binance, to like a bunch of other brokers, and price action has been much better since. Like we haven't seen these big wipeouts nearly as much. And yeah, I think the reason why we're trading so weird compared to almost any other market was basically because everyone was just way over leveraged by having their coins be their collateral basically. And that's a good thing. I'm glad that we are off of that, even though I love the MEX times because you just kind of faded every breakout and made money on it. But
that's where the PTSD comes from, right? Just for the newer audience, when you talk about like bear market PTSD or whatever, or just BitMEX PTSD, it's essentially every breakout was a failed breakout and every breakdown was a failed breakdown, just somewhat less frequently. So it essentially meant you could never trend follow or breakout trade ever, because it was just likely going to end up failing or being a deviation, etc., etc. So you were almost conditioned to get out of the way or fade big green candles, because the chances that that would continue were pretty low. You'd have like literally one move a day, and if you missed that move, it would just be a slow bleed mean reversion for the rest of it. It was like actual stuff of nightmares.
I loved it.
Yeah,
But,
I bet you did. Yeah, that's us on markets. I think I've summarized it enough times. In terms of quick news stuff, SEC rejects VanEck spot Bitcoin ETF. Market dumped a little bit on that news. That's kind of the main quote unquote catalyst. I'd say, contrary to what the market did, and this is going to sound really stupid, this was essentially priced in. I don't think it's surprising to any. Well, there was no expectation from the market to get an approved spot Bitcoin ETF. If you follow the Bloomberg guys or just people who follow this type of stuff, Gensler was pretty clear that he supported a futures-based one because CME is like super regulated. But in terms of spot, there's more to be done. So I feel like this may mark the end of ETF Moon narrative, because it's quite clear that I think if they're not going to approve VanEck, the probability of getting a spot ETF this year or even next year, I'd say is, I don't like those odds. I'd say it's pretty unlikely. So the futures-based ETF did its job, took us to all-time highs. But with this spot rejection, first of all, I think the market was expecting it. Second of all, I think that's really going to put a cap on that. Well, yeah, that narrative, that catalyst. But yeah, maybe you could make a bit of a spurious argument that, well, yeah, the spot ETF denial was priced in. However, the fact that the market dumped shows that it's weak. I mean, maybe, but I don't find that terribly compelling. It's just some bad news. The market pooped. It's like Friday night. Not super trading, not super liquid trading conditions. But yeah, I think the probability of a spot ETF generally pretty low now with this denial.
Yeah, we will try again.
Yes, of course we will.
It's just crypto. It's the eternal story of crypto. If you're new to crypto, this happens every other month. So, yeah.
I want to touch on NFTs to round up. So they've been getting pounded, right? Like really, really badly. If you look at, I've got the blocks NFT data dashboard up, and if you look at anything like active wallets, the volumes, transactions, etc., it's been rough. Even looking at pricing of projects with price memory, blue chips, whatever you want to call them, secondary market sales, anything. There was a big blow off in, that looks like September to me, and then since then it's just been lower lows every single month. I think we're getting close to the time where you at least start looking at NFTs and getting acquainted and familiar if you missed the run completely and think it has a chance of coming back. I'm still somewhat comfortable making the argument that we made in Technical Roundup, which is that if there's an accompanying alt season, alt run, etc., with the market not looking like a piece of shit, the chances that NFTs do something similar to what they did again, those odds are pretty reasonable. We might get some metaverse and type of narrative pumping those coins or gaming, etc. I'd say, first of all, they're not mutually exclusive. But second of all, if you consider just the cultural impact that NFTs made in a relatively short time, given the bull market they enjoyed, if you're going to bet on anything coming back that's not Bitcoin and ETH, I just feel like there's so much unexplored in that sector, and the froth potential is so high that it's one where I'd want to at least have, some ETH set aside, some Sol set aside, Phantom, MetaMask set up to buy some lottery tickets if the environment becomes more permissive.
I agree. I think it's like one of the, like if the entire market ticks up and if crypto kind of makes one big push into mainstream, that's kind of how I feel like every single like crypto bull market has kind of ended, is by being like pushed into the mainstream a little bit. And I mean, I'm not saying this in a bad way. It's just like in general, like once you have all eyes on the market, it's usually like relatively close to the end. And then it just keeps on, like it goes down a little and then comes back like a year or 2 or 3 later. And then you do it all over again and all over again. Every time people are like, okay, this time it's over, and then it just keeps coming back. But if we do have that again, right, that situation where suddenly everyone in the supermarket talks about it and your parents ask you where to buy this and that, if we get that situation, I think NFTs are probably going to be an area in crypto where you can make the most. I think the following bear market, and I mean, we've seen this with the recent NFT bear market, is going to be very, very brutal. It's going to be worse than if you're stuck in coins. Because
that's not true. You've got pictures to look at. What do you mean?
I mean, I guess if that's your upside, if you're fine with that, holding like pictures that have very little worth, that's okay. But in general, I think, I think it's a space where you'd be like, if I started out again from zero nowadays, it would be the space that I would try to get the most familiar with, because I think the opportunity there is the biggest, but also like the risk is enormous.
So you're gonna have,
that's exactly what you want. If you're like in your early 20s and you're like, okay, I mean, I'm new to this thing. I want to kind of see where I can leverage the little bit that I have the best, as in like, I don't want to go to a leveraged casino and kind of like bet on Bitcoin going up or down 1% or 2% and then get liquidated if I'm wrong. I want to have like a bet that is a little bit more sophisticated than that. I think that's probably like the best kind of place to look at. It's just like, I'm in general not sold on NFTs as a whole. I think they're probably going to stick around, but like in general, like from what I've seen around, most of the stuff doesn't interest me too much. But from a speculator kind of point of view, I've never seen so many people hate something in crypto ever.
Oh my god, like, dude! I've got friends in the art world and people I speak to about this type of stuff, and the seethe is just—it's like nothing I've ever seen before.
Yes.
Like I've got the tweet from the CEO of Discord, Jason Citron, I've probably butchered his name, and he teased this Discord and MetaMask or like ETH integration type of thing, and the meltdown that followed was just absolutely insane. Like the normies, especially the furries, I don't know what the exact relationship there is, but like the average level of discourse around NFTs is so bad. I mean, look, I'm just scrolling through some stuff here, right? And I know Twitter is not representative and all this type of stuff, but man, can't wait to tell my friends that Discord is encouraging pyramid schemes at grand cost to the environment and persuading them to cancel their Nitro subscriptions and use competing platforms. Of course, Ari, comes up and tries to explain something, which is a waste of time with these people. What else is there? Hold on. Implementing NFTs in Discord would result in bad PR and a drop in Nitro subscriptions as a large amount of people cancel. NFTs cause environmental damage and are mainly used for tax evasion and money laundering. The entire thing is a Ponzi scheme, right? And then someone says, "Can you explain?" And she refuses to because she thinks he's a bad faith actor. Fair enough. NFTs are a pyramid scheme designed to consume unnecessary amounts of energy. I mean, there's so much good stuff here. Currently, a single Ethereum transaction uses as much energy as a household does in a work week. We do not need another large company embracing this. And then someone else, of course, replies, and these are all artists or furries. I don't know the exact implications of that. Just flagging that up. It uses 24 times the energy an iPhone uses in a year. Since a lot of people will use you're using an iPhone as a counterpoint to NFTs being bad for the environment. I mean, this is unbelievable, right?
Yes.
And the thing that's most shocking to me is that this is Discord, right? So these are like gamers, these are digital natives, people who grew up around tech, computers, maybe skins on CSGO, Fortnite, etc. Like, the conviction and the imbued antagonism is so fucking high. I can't make sense of it. I really, really can't. I asked my artist friend, I'm like, why is it that way? And they tried to make the argument that it was like, oh, people are scared of stuff they don't know. I'm like, no. That doesn't explain being this angry, you know? Like, it has to be something else completely to take you to these extreme levels. And I don't know what the answer is.
I mean, I can give you the answer.
Give me the answer.
It's like, these people, like everyone that's been in gaming, right? And I mean, I know this because, like, if you play any online game in the last like 5 years, from time to time you get into like a lobby where people tell you to buy Bitcoin or like crypto or whatever, and you've 100% heard of crypto for forever, right? And you've 100% know people that have made a shitload of money in crypto, right? And you're sitting there and you're hating yourself for like not listening or like not looking into it anyway, and then this new thing comes up, and you're like, I mean, they're already like, most of these people that have commented already hate crypto,
yes,
right? And they're hating it because they missed out mostly. Like, there might be like some people that like have put in some more time, but most people are just like, fucking hell, I should have. And then it's like a defensive reaction. Now, fuck this is bad for whatever. And what they then do is like they just kind of turn that, okay, I'm an idiot for not looking into it, into anger, to kind of defend themselves from like looking stupid. And NFTs is just like the easiest kind of thing to attack, because I mean, at the end of the day, it's like pictures, like it's a JPEG that sells for 10 grand, 20 grand. And that is going to sound ridiculous to everyone that looks into it, right? Like, from the get-go, that's going to be like, okay, what the fuck? How does that work? And then it's an easy target, right? They've been looking for like targets in the crypto world forever. And the NFTs are kind of the best target to go for, because they don't really look into like what it really stands for and what it does. They're just like that. They're looking for a way to kind of lash out their anger, in my opinion, anyway. That's kind of like my experience. And
I mean, it makes sense, but like part of me almost doesn't want to agree with that, because it seems too self-indulgent for us. It's like, oh, well, you only feel that way because you didn't make money on this. You know, it's like, I don't know. Like, part of me feels that's not the whole thing. I'm sure for some people it's the case. You you miss out and you turn your whole personality into hating it. Like, I understand, but I'm not sure whether that's generalizable enough, right? Or that's broad enough to cover why people feel this way. Maybe that's something we're missing, right? That's entirely possible. That we're sitting here being like, haha, they're poor and they missed out, yada yada. But maybe we have blinders on. There's something we haven't learned or recognized about NFTs. I think that's far less likely, but fuck, maybe, right?
I think like there's another group of people that are just outraged at everything, and NFTs are a good thing to be outraged at, right? It's like The people that are reasonable, like reasonable people that are not angry at everything in their life, I think those are the ones that are like just angry because they missed out. And the people that just hate everything anyway, those are the people that like to kind of hate on it especially hard, even if they didn't like if they didn't care about the money or whatever. They're
So I
just,
guess I'm
like,
going to quote you.
miserable in
Don
general.
says people who hate NFTs are either poor or SJWs. That'll be a good tweet. Right? It's a very accurate summary of your views.
I mean, I'm not saying I'm the biggest fan either. Maybe, but it's like if you're this angry, I've never seen anything more bullish than these angry.
Oh, I know.
comments,
Yeah,
not gonna
yeah.
lie.
That's true. That's true.
It's just like you're gonna have to find a way to kind of get into the NFT space. Like, I don't think the projects per se that are around right now are going to be the ones that are going to be worth a shitload in the future. But I'm almost certain after reading all of these comments that it's going to be a big thing in the future. Because like, if you look back a couple of years and you check what people said when cryptocurrencies came up, it's the exact same thing. Now it's like with a larger audience, but still. And it's funny how like the first thing that reached mainstream kind of attention, and really, really broad mainstream attention in crypto has been NFTs, right?
Yes.
There's something to say, like, that tells you something. Their meme potential is quite high, I think. That doesn't have to mean that you can buy like any garbage project out there and make money.
Watch me.
Yeah, I mean, some garbage projects are gonna make you money, and there's some that are not as garbage as they might seem. But yeah,
Yeah. Cool. I think that's a pretty broad sweep as far as content goes. Make sure to flip back, jump back, whatever for the Bitcoin and ETH stuff. TLDR, trend up, but you know, if the breakout fails, stuff will probably start looking pretty ugly pretty quickly. It's good until it isn't. There's the summary. Is it up or down? No, it's good until it isn't. Is the accurate articulation of that. Yeah, that's kind of it from us. Like the video if you liked any of this, and thank you again to FTX for supporting us. Go download the app, shill some crypto to your family members, and then you can come tell us how terrible we are or what altcoins you got them into before a massive drop. I'm still being outperformed by my siblings' Solana holdings, but I'm not going to talk about that because I'm supposed to be the pro trader. So, you know, it's as if it didn't happen. That's all from us. Duck, have a cool weekend to our audience. Thank you, and we'll see you for Monday Spaces from me.
yep. See ya. Bye bye.
Take care.